Hi everyone, I'd like to start today by asking you all a couple of questions. First of all, what do you guys consider to be food? Second, what do you consider safe to actually consume? Are you okay with chemicals being added to our foods as pesticides and preservatives? How about actually changing the DNA structure of our produce by gene splicing to be able to make it resistant to a certain climate and for pest control? All of this is currently allowed by the FDA. What is the FDA? The FDA is our country's Food and Drug Administration. So we have artificial flavors, colors, preservatives, we have pesticides, we have genetically modified DNA, all being added to our food that we consume daily. And really, it's all really to benefit the manufacturers. It's cheap production for mass production. This can also make it cheaper for the consumer as well. But while we're saving $1, what price are we willing to put on our health, on our children's health, or our environment and our planet? Let's start by looking at GMOs. GMOs are the genetically modified organisms, and this is done through the gene splicing. These were first introduced to our foods in 1990. Manufacturers such as Monsanto will argue that GMOs are necessary to keep up with the demand of our population and that it actually increases the yield of crops. In actuality, their crops are not producing a greater yield and actually have a negative impact on our health and our environment. Organic crops can produce just as much, if not more, than the genetically modified organisms. So according to Urban Organic News, the largest amount of crops that are genetically modified are corn, wheat, and soy. These crops are a huge part of our diet. If you look, these ingredients are listed on almost every processed food item. Excuse me. Are you wondering the negative effects that GMO products and crops and all of these modified foods have on our bodies? It actually all begins in the womb with the unborn child. And according to WakeUpWorld.com, there are actually 2 chemicals from GM food pesticides that are found in the pregnant mother along with her fetus. And although manufacturers control the research on these chemicals, there's enough evidence to show the dangers for those consuming these chemicals, and also those that are exposed during the actual application process of the pesticides. One of the chemicals is actually called 3-MPPA, and excuse me, this can cause some effects such as cough, shortness of breath, sore throat, blurred vision, eye burns, abdominal cramps, excuse me, nausea, vomiting, and shock. Another chemical is CRY1AB. Studies have shown this to create an immune response causing resistance to the antibiotic streptomycin. So this actually increases our problem of the issue of antibiotic-resistant bacteria, which we're already experiencing today. Other studies have shown a correlation of GM foods and these risks, which these are pretty significant as well. Autoimmune diseases, infertility, accelerated aging, damage to some of our organs such as our kidney and our liver. We have damage to our gastrointestinal system and celiac disease. Still not convinced that GM foods are really a hazard? How about the negative effects that it has on our environment? We're seeing a decline in bee colonies, and without bees to pollinate, we will not have organic foods. Toxins run off into our water supply, contaminating our environment and the water that we drink. We have cross-pollination to the weeds, which are creating super weeds. So I have another question for you guys. Do you consider artificial coloring safe for consumption? According to numerous studies, we have artificial coloring that causes hyperactivity in children. Not only does it cause that in children, anyone that consumes the artificial coloring is actually at risk for cancer and increased allergies. due to the fact that these are toxic chemicals. It's really not food at all. This is also a cheaper way of manufacturers to produce foods for us. And according to DailyGreen.com, there's 15 million pounds of synthetic food dyes that are added to our foods annually. This is 5 times the amount since 1955. So I assume that some of that may be from also our increased population, so therefore they're creating more foods. But that's a huge amount that our children are consuming. Excuse me. We have cereals, candies, beverages, and these are just some of the contaminated foods. Another source of added chemicals are some preservatives, and this is pretty much you will find in anything that's in the center aisles of the grocery store. So, they add these preservatives to increase the shelf life of products. So have you heard of BHT? This is commonly added to even our children's cereals, our potato chips. What's the problem with this? Well, while more research is still being conducted on the BHT, there are links between tumors and cancers, and BHT is not only in our food, but they also add it to cosmetics and jet fuel. So there's some food for thought. I mean, that's a little bit disturbing that's added to jet fuel as long as our foods we consume. And while the BHT levels that are added to the food are considered to be safe, it accumulates in our bodies, and that's where it becomes the issue. So another aspect to consider is factory farming. I don't know if anybody has actually seen the documentary Food Inc., but that's definitely, something you might want to take a look at if any of this is of any interest to you. It's extremely inhumane to our animals. They are confined to crates that make it impossible for them to even lie down. We have exposure. They're being exposed to ammonia from their own waste. They are actually, in their crates where the waste is allowed to fall down between the slots in the crate, and it stays there, and they're breathing in the ammonia, which is causing respiratory disease. Excuse me. For pigs, the piglets are actually in crates separated from their mothers, and the mother is confined to a standing or laying down position only. She can't even turn around and see her piglets while she's able to nurse them. She cannot see them at all. So animals are being injected with these growth hormones for faster production of the food, which in turn we ingest when we eat this product. So factory farming is definitely cruel to the animals, but it's also generating 1 million tons of manure per day. This issue is huge because it's actually contaminating our water supply, killing nature, killing fish. It's emitting methane gas, which is a greenhouse gas, and it's contributed to our issue of global warming. We have antibiotics being added to these animals. They're being injected with antibiotics to prevent infections, such as like when the chickens, they actually have their beaks cut off so they don't peck each other. And for, the upper respiratory infections of the pigs. So a lot of this antibiotic is actually being excreted in their waste, which in turn, of course, runs off to the water supply. It's being, added to our crops when they spray the water on the crops, and then eventually it infects people as well. So factory farming has a huge impact on our water supply, from waste from the manure to the slaughterhouse. Excuse me. And so lastly, the issue of factory farming is deforestation, which is really unfortunate for them to make room for this mass production. So a couple of things I wanted to show you guys. A couple of household items that, are pretty typical in the United States. We have frosting. So while they do, show in big letters it's gluten-free, it also has artificial colorings in here. It has partially hydrogenated oils, which are unhealthy. We have modified items in here as well. How about candy? So artificial colors, artificial flavors, all being added. Also the partially hydrogenated soybean oil, which is unhealthy for you as well. Another typical is iced tea. So this actually has artificial color and number red, which is, red number 40, which is one of the most dangerous ones. And we also have common cereal for our kids. It's advertising gluten-free. 15-minute recipes, all good things, for the busy mom. Excuse me. But what's added to this is the BHT for preservatives. So rather than adding BHT, they would actually be able to add vitamin E, which would be a lot healthier option. So I also have some healthy options for you here too. So we have organic Cinnamon Crunch rather than the Cinnamon Chex with no artificial flavors and no BHT added to this. Organic fruit snacks. We have organic mac and cheese. So all some healthy options, that in the long run, might be a little bit expensive now, but in the long run it will have an impact on our health, and making a healthier lifestyle. So in conclusion, food dyes may make our food look more appealing and may be more cost effective, but that's the trick of these manufacturers. They, rather than wellness and prevention of illness, we are being exposed and being allowed to consume these products with these chemicals added to it, causing a lot of the common illnesses that we see today. So all of this really gives a new meaning to you are what you eat. So my advice, eat organic.